Story 1. I think most people are good at their core, though not without flaws. Life struggles can reveal both our strengths and weaknesses. Story 2. Most people tend to be good in a superficial sense. They assist others unless it is inconvenient or potentially dangerous for them. This is not necessarily a negative trait. I feel the same way. Story 3. I believe some people are generally good and some are generally bad. You do not know which is which until you truly get to know them. Story 4. The book Humankind by Rutger Bregman explores the question of what we are capable of creating as a society, offering a refreshingly optimistic perspective. Story 5. No, humans are naturally selfish and destructive. It is just our instinct. People who are good generally force themselves to behave that way. This is not to say that humans are all killers and psychopaths, but our natural instinct is not typically to do the right thing. Story 6. Yes, I believe that most people are good. However, it is much easier to gain wealth and power if one has malicious intentions. Story 7. I don't think categorizing humans as good or bad is that simple. What some people see as good, others may view as bad. Good individuals can do bad things, and individuals perceived as bad can do good things. I like to believe I am a good person, but I know I have made mistakes. Story 8. Yes, there are many people in this world, and you typically only hear about the negative actions of others. Story 9. Yes, people are generally good. However, our brains are tuned to find the one foe among 100 friends, leading us to focus on that one negative individual and ignore all the positives. Negativity bias is well researched and proven through various experiments. The foe is most likely not a bad person per se. They simply have different ideas and opinions. In times of catastrophe, people do not turn on each other. They help one another. Consider recent airplane crashes or earthquakes. Movies often portray the unrealistic opposite because they seek to trigger emotions. Research indicates that we remember stories far longer than their actual sources. After a few years, movies may subconsciously morph into our reality because they evoke the same, often stronger, emotions as real life, while our consciousness forgets they are just films. Experiments show that people who watched certain movies later developed different perspectives on life. It turns out that in early wars, most soldiers refused to kill. It was only a small percentage of individuals with psychopathic traits, which inherently affect empathy, who accounted for most kills. Most soldiers are driven by a sense of team spirit, not because they agree with their country's politics or have a desire to harm others, but because they want to protect their comrades with whom they have spent significant time. The famous prison guard experiment was staged and repeated several times by other teams, resulting in the prisoners and guards forming friendships. Most people who commit acts deemed evil believe they are doing something good. It is usually a matter of perspective. In summary, humans are fundamentally good. However, our perception of humanity tends to be quite negative. Story 10. I believe people are inherently good. We experience pain and regret when we cause harm, and we generally understand right from wrong, making the right choice 9 times out of 10. The issue is that good deeds often go unrecognized. Taking advantage of someone in a vulnerable moment for personal gain is frequently rewarded. I truly believe we are meant to be good. We are just conditioned to behave otherwise. Story 11. Most individuals are quite good in one-on-one interactions or in small groups for a short period. The larger the group, the more challenging the dynamics among its members. This can be observed in various religious or political organizations. Story 12. I believe most people intend to be good and see themselves as such. However, they may act in their own self-interest at the expense of others if the benefit is sufficient. The level of benefit they require before taking such action defines their character, in my opinion. Story 13. Most people are not good. They know what it takes to be good, but very few will choose to be good. The hardest part is remembering each day to be good. It is always a choice. Story 14. I probably believed it at one point, but the last decade has shown me otherwise. Most people put their self-interest first and, worse than that, show a general disregard or lack of understanding of how that may affect the world around them. Story 15. People as creatures are neither good nor bad, but very corruptible. Humanity and the capacity for compassion create roadblocks to prevent people from becoming corrupted and harmful. I believe that if given a chance, people are good when all their needs are met. Story 16, however, the people who receive exposure and have history written about them are often not the ones who deserve it. It is much easier to gain power and fame by being bad than by being good. Story 17. It ebbs and flows. People who are neglected tend to find empathy and compassion. However, there is also the affluenza group. Story 18. If left to themselves without any rules or laws, many people will harm each other for no apparent reason. Story 19. Yes, but at the same time, everyone has a side of themselves that they don't show. Story 20. Any person is capable of good or bad. I want to believe in good, but greed has ruled the world forever. Greed is like a parasite. It cannot kill the host. Kindness and community are the glue holding it together, keeping the host healthy. We really cannot have good without evil, and I dislike that. Story 21. I believe people have the capacity for both good and bad. Many demonstrate kindness and empathy, but fear or greed can lead to harm. It depends on factors such as environment and circumstances. Story 22. No. Many experiments have proven that, given the freedom, people will inflict harm on one another. Story 23. I would like to emphasize that we are inherently good. Prioritizing your needs and desires is not inherently negative. Judging others based on your personal definitions of good is what can be problematic. For instance, if your definition of good involves getting what you want when you want it without giving anything in return, you may view it as bad if someone else does not share that perspective. It may not occur to you that this line of thinking can be unkind. Does this make sense? I sometimes struggle with articulating my thoughts in writing. Story 24. I do not think people are exclusively in one category. There are serial killers who have had good work and home lives. They have friends and relationships. There are racists who can be great parents and spouses. A truly evil person with no redeeming qualities is rare. I believe the majority of people are those who engage in bad behavior infrequently. Story 25. Yes, but I prefer thinking of my transgressors as bad so I can express my hate, spite, anger, and grudges against them. Story 26. I believe there is a fair amount of good and bad people. Many people may perceive humans as just bad, but the fact is that many good deeds are overlooked. When was the last time you praised someone for picking up something that had fallen in the street, even if it wasn't their job? Story 27. There is limited opportunity for positivity when in survival mode, and many individuals find themselves in this situation. I believe most people do not have bad intentions, but that does not automatically imply they have good intentions either. Story 28. Not good people seem to have more fun than good people, so no. How many people are really willing to sacrifice their own enjoyment or stability for the sake of others? Story 29. I think it's a simple question. I don't believe that all people have an underlying compulsion to do good or evil. Story 30. No, I studied political science and history and worked in politics. The idea of humans working together for the collective good is a worthless thought. Story 31. I used to think most people were bad. I've come to realize that good people can do bad things and bad people can do good things. Very few people are inherently bad or good. So to answer the question, I now believe that more people are good than they are bad. Story 32. Depends on your DNA and environment. Good individuals can become less admirable. Those with negative traits can improve. And what does it mean to be good? Anyway, Story 33. I believe it is through our teachings and experiences that we can develop negative traits. Sure, there are always exceptions and irrational individuals. But generally speaking, I feel that most people are born with good intentions. It is usually through the relentless struggles of life that they may turn to negative behaviors. I spent my entire early life as an addict. I have met countless individuals who most people would judge as terrible. However, beneath it all, they are just like us, trying to survive as we all are. For some, survival might involve taking more extreme actions temporarily. In the end, I believe that anyone can overcome their challenges and emerge as a better person. The surprising aspect is that nearly all addicts are aware of their addiction and want to quit. Even the most hardened users often recognize the need to stop at some point, but it is easier said than done. You cannot simply judge people as bad based on their actions and behavior without first understanding the motivations behind those actions. Intent is everything. Story 34. 90% of people are good. However, when their self-interest is at stake, only 10% may demonstrate kindness. For example, 90% of people will help a stranger who has fallen on the sidewalk. But if someone is racing for the last pair of favorite shoes during a Black Friday sale and a stranger falls in front of them, only 10% are likely to help the stranger instead of pursuing the shoes. Story 35. I believe that people, on average, do what they feel is the right thing. I don't think, for example, that it was Mao Zedong's goal to kill almost 100 million people. Rather, I think he was trying to advance his country and believed the deaths were a necessary evil or simply did not realize his policies would lead to such a high number of fatalities. While what he did was certainly evil from the perspective of the majority of the world, I don't believe he ever saw himself as the villain. Story 36. I believe that a default human is born with a basic level of empathy, which can be nurtured and developed through positive parenting. I view evil as similar to mold. It naturally develops in environments that are not well maintained. Healthy conversations between individuals and intelligent mentors help prevent the growth of evil in minds. Story 37. Yes, but the average person is not the one who gets to write the history books. I believe most people are harmless at their cores, not angels but not evil. They want to be a good influence in their little circles and live peacefully for the most part. Unfortunately, propaganda is a powerful tool, and the hatred we are taught by individuals who realize they could profit from turning people against each other is a hard thing to overcome. Social media has also been damaged by these same types, as evidenced when Facebook saw usage skyrocket over negative content. But it's all a farce, forced, fake, and needing constant maintenance. I know many people are genuinely good, and while it's easy to focus on negatives, that perception is not accurate. Story 38. Most people adhere to their own moral values, which they consider to be good. Issues arise when those values are harmful to others. There are exceptions, but I believe most people are inherently good. However, humanity as a whole is not good. Story 39. I know many people who consider themselves and others in their peer group as good individuals. However, from my perspective, I find them to generally be dishonest, hateful, and cowardly. It would be helpful if you defined what you mean by good. Story 40. There are more good people than bad people in the world. I am 63 years old, but sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones closest to you. However, I have always remained positive, full of hope, love, respect, and faith. Story 41. In relationships, people do not have malicious intent most of the time. Imagine walking around thinking, I want to make myself feel bad and upset the person I love. Story 42. I am naive enough to think that, and I am always surprised and upset when I am fooled again. Story 43. Yes, as a social species, we must be capable of operating with others, which requires us to be good enough to do so. The worst among us are few in number, but they are systematically rewarded by the systems we create that allow the greedy and ruthless to rise to the top. We cannot simply exile or eliminate them for their negative behavior, as chimpanzees do. If a chimp hoarded all the food, it would be eaten alive. But we consider that success. Story 44. I believe most people are good and want to do good. However, it is how people were raised and the influences they had in their lives that determine how much good they do or if they actively seek their own interests at the expense of others. But I believe everyone has the potential to do good things. Whether they choose to or not is up to them. Story 45. People conquered the world as a species because they helped each other, but that often changes when we live in large communities. Essentially, people are good in a small circle. Take the mafia, for example. Within the family, loyalty is strong, but everyone else does not matter. Story 46. Most people exhibit negative behavior. Laws and societal norms keep us in check. This is evidenced by the need for laws to dictate acceptable behavior and by historical examples that demonstrate how, without oversight, individuals can justify any horrific action they choose. Story 47. What I noticed is that even when something good comes along that you could share with the world, most people don't want to share it, not even those who are supposedly good, because they know there are many people who could ruin it. Considering that, is anyone truly good? No. But I am not truly good either. I think it has a lot to do with the human instinct to survive and gain resources. Story 48. No, unfortunately, most people are not good at all. I have met many bad people in my life that I do not believe there are many good people. Story 49. People are neither generally good nor bad. People are a culmination of their upbringing, nature, and the circles they keep. Story 50. In the 42 years I have been alive, I have been involved in 2 verbal altercations, both times with intoxicated individuals. Overall, most people are either neutral or good. Story 51. There are still many issues in this world, but there has never been a level of peace worldwide like this in history, so most people are good. Story 52. People are neither good nor bad. Individuals are shaped by their experiences. Most people do not enjoy a good life, do not reflect on themselves, their motivations, or take action to improve their circumstances. This often leads to feelings of hate or unfriendliness. Nevertheless, people strive to make the best decisions they believe are right. I think people lack empathy and self-awareness, which is unfortunate. Story 53. This is a really interesting question. My first thoughts were, what defines good? Who decides what is good? How does good differ from bad? There is a lot of nuance to these questions, especially when we consider independent circumstances, societal norms, and expectations. For example, a woman walks home alone one day and notices a stroller on the other side of the road. She thinks she hears a noise coming from the stroller but isn't sure, and there doesn't appear to be anybody nearby. What does she do? She approaches the stroller, believing she may be helping an abandoned infant, and takes it with her, perhaps to go to a local police station. This action is typically deemed as doing a good deed. She chooses to walk by and ignore the stroller. This action is typically viewed as bad. Now, what if we add other factors, like another person overlooking the stroller but out of sight of the first woman? Has this woman now stolen a child or approached a potential trap set by a human trafficking group? Alternatively, was she ignoring the stroller or simply in a hurry to visit her own child in the hospital? Is it bad to prioritize your own benefit? Or maybe she assumed the mother was just out of view. It's a basic scenario, but you get the idea. I think every day we are given chances to do both good and bad things, but how we view these actions depends solely on our own moral compass and the society we each live in, which are vastly different and have various expectations of right and wrong. Story 54. You cannot generalize that. There are good people and bad people. It is really as simple as that. Story 55. As a child and teenager, I always believed in the goodness of people. Then I got a job in IT support and I truly lost my faith in humanity. 11 years later, I found a good job where 25% of my colleagues are genuinely good people, 25% are entitled, and 50% are difficult to work with. I've regained some of my empathy for humans. For the 25% good people, I will go above and beyond to help them. I treat the entitled individuals the same way they treat me. As for the difficult colleagues, I have to approach them like kindergartners. It's surprising to see people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who don't know how to perform basic tasks while being responsible for significant responsibilities and receiving high salaries. Story 56. No one is good except God. Jesus said, "Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone." Mark 10 verse 18. Story 57. I believe there is a significant disconnect between genuinely being good and our perception of good people. Many individuals strive to be perceived as good, often at any cost, without genuinely caring about their actions. This is why various social bubbles exist. Within these bubbles, individuals do not critically evaluate what is good but simply follow the crowd. In response to the question, I contend that people are generally not inherently good but desire to be viewed as good. Empathy appears to be at an all-time low. Story 58. people are generally good to their in-group. The advancement of morality has included the teaching that we should see more people as part of an in-group to respect and treat well. It makes sense that we have this bias. When resources are scarce, it helps to have justifications for why our group should survive over others. These biases can be highly exploited by those in a position to reach many people with their message. So, one could say that humans are generally as good as the world allows them to be. Story 59. It takes courage and moral strength to be good. It is easy and convenient to be bad. I do not know if people are generally good or bad, but I do know that people often succumb to the temptation of taking the easy and convenient route. Story 60. One must have a universal definition of good, as it means different things to different people. For me, goodness encompasses honesty, accountability, and compassion. Therefore, not everyone can be considered good. Goodness is something we can strive for. I am unsure if I have achieved it myself, but I am trying. I believe it is not easy. Story 61. No, I do not. In my life, I have only met a handful of people whose behavior I would generally call good. Many people seem interested in having others believe they are good and will follow a few moral guidelines to achieve that. I myself am not good. I daydream of terrible violence and torture toward those who cause me difficulties and struggle to control my anger. Story 62. I believe that greed is the core destructive force of humanity, present in everyone. It drives the worst of human actions, from murder and exploitative business decisions to environmental destruction, political corruption, and war. Throughout history, greed has been at the root of countless atrocities and will continue to shape our future unless we confront it. As a species, we cannot move forward, unite, or achieve peace unless we abandon our obsession with wanting more. Greed is deeply embedded in human nature, and ultimately, it destroys everything. On an individual level, people can change for the better, showing kindness and compassion. However, as a collective, humanity remains controlled by greed, from the smallest personal choices to large-scale destruction and global domination at the expense of others. Story 63. Most people are good, but we often fail to see the good things that happen. Instead, we focus on the negative aspects. This leads to feelings of depression and anxiety. Story 64. A person can be good, but people as a group often exhibit negative behavior. It is unclear why this occurs, but when humans form collectives, they tend to act in harmful ways. Story 65. Everyone thinks they are good, and they might be the best person for some and the worst for others. This also includes me and the original poster. Story 66. Good. Compared to what standard? No, I believe people are inherently bad. Otherwise, children would raise themselves. Story 67. I believe people are generally self-interested. Through societal expectations and pressures, individuals are encouraged to engage in prosocial behaviors and have a genuine interest in replicating them, either for their self-image or how others perceive them. However, are you serious? This universe is built on destruction, ruthlessness, and dominance. If humans were good by any objective measure, they could not have evolved opposable thumbs. Story 68. I believe most people are at their core benignly self-interested. They usually do not desire to harm anyone, but they tend to center everything around themselves on some level. Whether this results in good or bad outcomes often depends on how well one can view things from another's perspective and how many steps of consequences they consider. Consequences here is meant in the neutral manner of casually linked results. Story 69. Yes. If you have been told otherwise, it is mostly because the media wants to polarize you. Social media cannot function without controversy. Story 70. Controversial opinion. I believe that historically, most women are generally good in that they do not engage in actions such as rape, murder, torture, warfare, pillaging, or attempts to dominate other countries. Men, on the other hand, do not share the same historical tendency. Story 71. I believe people are generally good, as most individuals do not actively aim to harm others. However, people are also a product of their societies, whether in smaller families and communities or larger groups like countries. Much of their behavior is influenced by the accepted norms of these larger groups. Individuals from societies with a more collectivist mindset tend to be more aware of how their actions affect others, while those from more individualist societies often have less of this awareness. Additionally, the concept of good is a moral judgment. What one person considers good within their moral framework may differ from another's perspective, and much of this is influenced by education. Story 72. People are generally good on an individual level. It is the group dynamic that can turn them evil and self-serving. I am sure there is an evolutionary reason for this. Story 73. People develop according to their circumstances and form an identity based on acquiring the highest possible social position within that framework. I do not believe anyone is inherently good or evil. Story 74. This is similar to the nature versus nurture argument. I believe that learning morality and what society considers good is a learned behavior. Story 75. Most crimes are opportunity crimes. People do not plan to act maliciously. They simply seize the chance to do so. Individuals are more likely to behave poorly when there are no consequences. For example, I live in the Netherlands, where driving is very safe and almost everyone follows the rules, sometimes erring on the side of caution, such as stopping at crosswalks even when there might be a 2-minute wait for a pedestrian. In contrast, biking is often chaotic, with individuals riding the wrong way at night without lights and distracted by their phones, or even failing to stop at crosswalks and endangering pedestrians. These are the same individuals engaging in two similar activities but facing vastly different legal outcomes. Consider all the people who face criticism simply for doing their jobs in public-facing roles. People can be frustrating. Story 76. As individuals, people tend to act and react positively towards others, perhaps as a survival instinct, with the subconscious realization that negative behavior usually leads to undesirable outcomes. However, in groups, the phenomenon often referred to as mob mentality creates a sense of anonymity, allowing individuals to blend in with the crowd. For example, in recent months, certain online platforms have seen an increase in calls for violence in the name of justice, with suggestions to harm others or take extreme measures against perceived enemies. Yet, in the real world, where individuals are not shielded by anonymity, interpersonal relations remain largely cordial and decent, regardless of social or political differences. People as individuals tend to display goodness, possibly because they feel the need to do so. In contrast, people in groups may not exhibit the same level of decency, as they feel less accountable for their actions. Story 77. I don't believe most people are generally good. I think most individuals have their own goals and are willing to step on others to achieve them. Many fail to consider the impact their actions have on others. One might argue that their actions are not bad because they are unaware of the consequences. However, I believe a good person would reflect on how their actions affect others before they act. I also think many people have a callous attitude towards those they do not know. If someone were offered a discount on their purchase or the option to share it with 2 other people, most would choose to keep the discount for themselves. This indicates a lack of concern for people they have never met. Story 78. No, otherwise the world would be better. Good doesn't just mean not bad. Most people exist somewhere in the middle. Very few people truly want to make the world a better place, and many more would knowingly make it worse if it benefits someone they hate. Story 79. People are generally good. We would not have survived as a species without cooperating. This basic interest in social groups has developed not through religion or any structured code of conduct, but through our bonds as fellow primates. We have attained dignity. If this were not the case, we would not notice or punish abhorrent behaviors. Getting down to specifics, you hold the door open for someone coming after you. If you have a cart full of items at the store and the person behind you only has a newspaper, you let them go in front of you. It is how we operate. Story 80. I think your question is very complicated and doesn't simply have an answer like yes or no. I believe everyone has choices. In any situation, every day you are presented with many choices. Some actions lead to personal growth, happiness, and can benefit society and make others happy too. Some actions can harm others, and other actions can harm oneself or both. Harm can be physical or mental. Sometimes we make the wrong choices, not always on purpose. Sometimes we think that harming someone is the right choice, for example. When someone has hurt you, revenge might seem like the right choice at the time, as it is much easier to hate someone who wronged you than to forgive and move on. I think most people generally want to be good. Sometimes there are people who don't care about being good or bad, but most people care about doing the right thing, even if what they perceive to be the right thing is not always right. Revenge when being wronged, even if it is within legal actions, is a good example. Even someone like Hitler believed his actions were righteous, even if no one reading a history book agrees, and everyone perceives him as evil. Do not think for a second that people like him see themselves as evil. Evil people see themselves as misunderstood heroes. But let's say it like this. If you are in history books in a negative way, or if you end up in court for crimes, you are doing something very wrong with your life. Most people simply live their lives, make mistakes, but tend to at least try to be good. Story 81. Yes, just look at what happens whenever there is a tragedy. People from around the world rally to help however they can, some at great personal risk. When an animal gets stuck in a well, people will go to great lengths to save it. When someone gets lost in the woods, search and rescue volunteers go out in droves to find them, risking getting lost or hurt themselves. I am certain that people are fundamentally good. Sure, there are individuals who act poorly, and our current society unfortunately incentivizes such behavior, but the average person just about anywhere is good. Story 82. People are mostly selfish and evil and can do good. Anyone saying otherwise is just rationalizing or is very naive. Story 83. I believe people are generally good, especially in real-life interactions. When something goes wrong, there is a strong likelihood that someone will step up and help. I have become disheartened by shallow talking points and memes on social media that vilify and label good or nice people as untrustworthy. The heightened level of skepticism toward goodwill seems out of touch with reality and has a negative effect on interpersonal interactions and community building. Story 84. I believe it really depends on how well-fed we are. If we have decent resources, the average person tends to behave decently. However, when resources are scarce, there is likely to be more negative behavior. Resources can include food, collectible cards, concert tickets, or even a foul ball hit into the stands. We need to ensure that society does not become trapped in a metaphorical lifeboat or elevator. The survivors will often express regret about what they were forced to do in those situations. There are also sociopaths and psychopaths in all circumstances, but they are outliers. Story 85. I believe people are inherently good, but I also think our species is detrimental to this planet and may lead to its downfall. Story 86. The priority of needs for the human race is water, food, heating, shelter, comfort, happiness, and morality. In times of peace, people have the luxury to contemplate matters they normally wouldn't while struggling to survive. When you are starving and on the verge of death, you are more concerned with the overwhelming pain and how to make it stop, which is why some may even resort to cannibalism. What makes today's morality valid? In the past, people engaged in actions we now consider evil, and I bet future generations will judge us similarly. People of the 20th century were often criticized for relying on a corrupt capitalist system. Then there is the inconsistency in our morality, often clouded by bias. Many actions we deem evil are committed against weaker species without a second thought. Story 87. It's interesting that you have to ask this question while being on Reddit. Humans are full of contradictions. By nature, we want what's best for us, and the vast majority of Americans feel no remorse for taking it, especially if there are no consequences for them. It's true that a strong rule of law and a fundamental belief in a higher power can constrain the evil in people's hearts. The more we undermine these principles, the more hopeless people will feel as they observe the decay of society, leading to sadness and depression. In fact, this is exactly what we are witnessing right now. Story 88. I believe that most people are simple until they gain power. Even the most ordinary person, when given a bit of power, changes either for the better or for the worse. Story 89. Yes, because of traffic. The fact that we don't tear each other apart during rush hour is amazing. Think about it. Stuck in a complete collapse, going nowhere, After a full day at work doing unsatisfying tasks for someone who gets even richer while paying you very little. Tired and hungry, passing through a small stretch of road for 1 hour that should take 10 minutes at most, all while knowing that many of us could be working from home and not have to deal with this daily commute. And yet, when someone cuts in line, we do not react violently toward them or everyone in their car. Incredible. Story 90. Humans are inherently flawed and often exhibit wickedness from the moment they are born. It is typically after receiving education that most individuals begin to act in ways that are considered good. It is quite rare to encounter a person who is inherently good and benevolent. Most people tend to be good and understanding primarily towards themselves. Children often display these behaviors as they are not fully educated and well-mannered yet. Story 91. People are only as good as they can protect their life, livelihood, or ego. When any of these are seriously threatened, the thin veil of composure and polite conduct dissipates. If it ever came down to you or them, most would sooner push you further underwater if it meant keeping themselves from drowning. The Joker had a pretty accurate summation of human nature in The Dark Knight. Story 92. Most individuals are capable of amazing things. However, the problem arises when malevolent individuals form cult groups for their own benefit. People in groups can achieve incredible feats, but they can also commit tragic and horrific acts. Story 93. I believe that the concept of good is very subjective. Even with a broad definition, it seems that most people display negative traits, with the severity of those traits varying. I do not think there is an objective standard of good. What I consider to be good will not always align with someone else's perception of good, and vice versa. Story 94. Most people will do a good thing if it does not harm them. However, when choosing between others and themselves, most individuals require a very strong reason to choose others over themselves. Story 95. Intent matters a lot to me, and I think it's fair to say that when people act in ways that might be considered bad, it's not usually with the intention of causing pain. However, that doesn't erase the pain or make someone good. Overall, pain is not inherently good or bad. It simply exists. Sometimes it can be good and sometimes it cannot. Story 96. I consider myself a self-aware individual who is somewhat paranoid and trusts very few people. However, I tend to give strangers my heart because I want to believe I can be a good person, while also being strong enough not to become a victim of those who perceive my traits as weaknesses. I believe that good individuals are the norm, but bad traits are prevalent and often necessary to succeed in many areas. Liberty and virtue are important concepts to me. Liberty focuses on the freedom of will and the opportunity to choose, while virtue represents a striving for the best in all people. This is what I aim to prioritize. You can find good people if you look for them. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.